Welcome to this week's podcast of Two Men in the Middle, where two men in the middle of the country give center-left, center-right perspective on news and events of the day. I'm Brandon Kinnig.
I'm Craig Huey.
So, Craig, we are 5 days out from the most impactful election of our lifetimes.
That's what they keep telling me.
And there's a lot to dissect. There's a lot of energy. Before we get to the polling and the way the campaigns are approaching this, let's just stand back and talk about the sheer number of people that are voting early, because it is historic.
Yeah.
We have never seen numbers like this.
So you came with a whole bunch of paper today.
I did. I came prepared. So
do you have like an election binder or an election like manila folder that you put stuff in and print
I
out?
do. I
Okay.
have like a folder of printouts, and I continually update it.
Brandon, you and my wife would make great travel partners.
Oh, really?
Because you'd plan everything out, you'd print everything
Organized,
out.
yeah.
Whenever we take a trip, she gives us, like without her, she hands us like the manila folder with our complete itinerary in it.
See, I've
Yes.
typically always done that
You
with
guys would get along.
schedule exactly.
She would have more fun traveling with you than us, her family, without a doubt.
And so the U.S. Election Project, which is a site online, it's a consortium of stakeholders that contribute data. It's headed up by Michael McDonald, who's a professor from the University of Florida. So they report the daily numbers for early voting from every state. So as of an hour ago, over 80 million early votes have been cast, 80,721,858. 28 million or so of those votes are in-person votes. 52 million are mail ballots that have been returned, and there's still 37 million mail ballots that are outstanding.
And these are across all states?
Across all states.
Okay.
So if you add the outstanding mail ballots, that's 117 million potential early votes. But just looking at those 80 million right now, nationally voters have cast 59% of the total votes that were counted in the 2016 presidential election. So think back to 2016, everybody that voted, 59% of those votes have already been cast this time around, and we are 5 days out from Election Day. And the crazy thing is, if you drill down, look at the crosstabs by states, Texas leads the nation. 95% of the total votes cast in the 2016 presidential election in Texas have already been cast 5 days out. 95%.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That shows you the turnout machine in Texas.
So doesn't that show you, too, people that typically don't vote are voting? That's one of the takeaways from this.
That is, and I have a statistic for that, too. So more than 1 in 4 early voters so far who are voting didn't vote in 2016. More than 1 in 4 of the voters who have voted already did not vote in 2016. That's 20 million new voters who have already cast a ballot in this election.
So 20 million new voters. And you have to think those are protest votes against Trump.
Oh, many of them. And we do have some demographic information on that. So looking at Georgia and Texas, which are now toss-up states, more African-American seniors have already cast a ballot in both Georgia and Texas entirely than voted in those states in 2016. Yeah. So the early vote from African-American seniors has already surpassed a total African-American senior vote in both states in the last presidential election. And that is significant.
And what's interesting about that is Biden doesn't warrant a protest vote, does he? I mean, if you typically don't vote and you feel strongly about one of these candidates, that has to be an indicator of how strongly you feel against Trump. I would think.
A protest vote and enthusiasm. You're willing to get out there early to register your discontent. Also, in 2018, we know from the midterms that young voters occupied a larger share of the early vote than in many of the prior elections. And they ended up being a larger share of the overall electorate in 2016. So if you look at the 2016 numbers, there was early young voters are turning out in greater numbers early on. But does that mean they're actually going to be a greater share of the electorate? They were, and we're seeing that again in 2020 now. Younger voters are accounting for a larger share of the early vote than they were in 2016, similar to the portions of early vote young youth votes that we saw in 2018.
And what's the age bracket on what they call a youth vote?
18 to 29 is the age bracket we're looking at for youth vote.
So you're barely out of the youth vote bracket, Brandon. That's got to make you feel good.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I wish I was younger, but I'm there. And then this is where Republicans should also be very nervous. When we look at the youth vote by state, 18 to 29 who've already voted early.
Line yourself up with your mic, Brandon.
Oh, sorry. So when we look at the youth vote by state, so those that have already voted early, Texas, the early votes cast by 18 to 29-year-olds is already over 7 times higher than it was in 2016 early votes cast. In Florida, it's 4 times higher. North Carolina, it's 5 times higher. In Georgia, it's 7 times higher.
So how much of this do you think is just people moving? How much of this is just vote moving from day of to off to day before? People that said, okay, how many of those, are they new voters, or did we just take one big chunk of vote and just move it to another mechanism?
That's a very good question. We know that in some of these cases, Texas, Florida, North Carolina specifically, that some of them have to be new voters. It can't just be shifting patterns of behavior.
At that number,
because when you're talking about 7 times as many, you know that you're looking at numbers that's more than the total youth vote in the prior presidential election. Because 7 times is just unfathomable.
Yeah.
We also know that based on 2018 data, that when we saw the early vote, the shift in youth to the early vote, then it also resulted in an overall increase in the youth vote in 2018.
Yeah.
So I think we can look at that pattern. That's the same pattern we're seeing now in the presidential election, and say that we're going to see a larger share of the electorate, a larger share of the vote cast by young people. And I think the other number, let's see, that I had, in Florida, North Carolina, Maine, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, early votes cast by youth have already exceeded the 2016 margin of victory in that state's presidential race.
So we are headed toward historical turnout.
It's historic. And Republicans, meanwhile, you know that Trump has really dissuaded Republicans from voting early.
Yeah.
He's been all about voting on Election Day. The problem with that is it's putting all your eggs in one basket. Republicans have to spend more money to target more voters through all the way up until Election Day, because they can't take voters off their voter lists and voter rolls for their targeting. And it means that there's no margin for error. If something happens, if there's a long line, if there's an emergency, if someone can't leave work on time, or if they leave too late and they don't make it before 7, they can't come back the next day and vote. And so if you look at the states that report by party registration for all of the early vote cast so far, 46.8% cast by Democrats, 29.7% cast by Republicans, 22.8% unaffiliated. So that is a large margin of votes to make up. You're talking about well over 7 million vote edge that Democrats have already locked in.
And this is what we've talked about. There just may not be enough raw votes left come Election Day to make up for the gap from early voting.
It's going to be so high. And the other thing we have to take into consideration on Election Day, too, is that different states have different procedures for how they count the votes and which votes they count first. North Carolina and Florida count these early votes as they get them in, and they will release a pretty much total vote on election night. Other states do not do that. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania cannot start counting votes, advance votes, and mail ballots until Election Day. And then Wisconsin in particular, it's even more difficult because they have to wait till the polls close before they can even start counting advance ballots.
And Pennsylvania, I think, will count votes up to 5 days after the 3rd.
They will,
the election,
and that ruling,
if it's postmarked.
And that ruling was held by the U.S. Supreme Court because it was appealed by Republicans. So
and Coney Barrett did not get to rule on that.
She could have. She decided not to because she said she didn't have enough time to read the details of the case, and it was too soon after she was sworn in. So
off to a good start for ACB to say, hey, I'm not getting in that on my first day.
I think we need to give credit where credit is due. If she was just a political hack, she would have jumped right 100%. In and done that. She chose not to. So
we'll stick with the numbers here, but do you think Brett Kavanaugh kind of proved himself a little bit of a hack
of a political
this
hack?
Week?
He did, and
we'll save
his
that
opinion
till
is
later. But let's make sure we hit that because when a Supreme Court judge basically just parrots the president's party line, that's if you want to know why people are thinking about expanding the court, you don't have to look any bit farther than that.
And it wasn't just the party line, it was inaccurate information he gave too. I mean, the fact of the matter is that for the entirety of our democratic system, it has always been the fact that we count every vote, and there are always votes that come in after the polls close. There's always the absentee vote. In many states, it's counted last. We don't stop counting them just because there's this somehow necessity to only count and to give out a vote total on election night. We continually update based on legitimate votes that should have been counted that are received according to the state laws and state
And if Kavanaugh
statutes.
would have said, "Hey, I just read the state statute, and that's what I'm enforcing," I would have had no problem with that.
Right. He made a very broad generalization, which really I think scared a lot of people and
he made a
put a lot of
political
fear
statement, not a statement of law, which I think that's what's turned everybody off.
Exactly.
But let's get back to the numbers because that's the real story this week. So Republicans have been promoting that their get out to vote efforts and their registration efforts, that those are reflected in those numbers, but it's not part of the narrative that's being pushed by the media right now. Is that the Republicans again just finding anything to grab onto to remain their base to remain excited about, or do you really feel, in looking at all the data that you've poured over, is there this glimmer of hope for Republicans to say that registration work is going to pay off for them during this election cycle?
Well, I think it remains to be seen, and it depends on the state, right? We know that registration effort has been more impactful in some states than others. Florida primarily, where they have claimed that they've been able to register all these new voters, as well as Pennsylvania. The difficulty, the challenge there is that we haven't seen that borne out in the polling. So even if they have been able to register these additional voters, there seems to be enough slippage and enough bleeding among Republicans who are not voting for Trump and among unaffiliated, where Biden is winning these groups by substantial numbers, to where that it's being offset. So these registration efforts, I think. And then when you get beyond Pennsylvania and Florida, I don't really hear or see a lot of talk about Republicans bragging about.
Those are the only two states. Really,
states.
Pennsylvania is the one that really, really. So that's not. I guess that's something to watch as we get results in, as we get through
this.
It's
something to watch, but at the same time, we have to remember that Hillary underperformed Obama greatly in Philadelphia. So if Biden is able to just build upon Hillary's margin, even slightly, he can overcome that registration advantage. And so it's all about turnout. That's why Obama visited Philly earlier this week. That was a calculated move to increase the black turnout in the inner city. You also have the inner ring suburbs in the Philadelphia area, Bucks County, Chester County, that are also, mirroring what's going around happening across the country with suburbs turning blue. And so those areas are very difficult as well. And so Trump has a challenge to hold on to those. And so the key is, if these additional votes that were garnered came from mostly rural areas and are spread out across the state, it remains to be seen whether or not that will alone can overcome just the turnout advantage if Biden is successful in turning out his voters.
And it feels like in 2016, at this point in time in the race, Trump had the wind at his back. Everything was breaking his way.
We can't discount the news cycle and the Comey effect.
The Comey letter.
Which just, completely, I think, had a huge impact across the race. That's also why during that time, the last 2 weeks of the election, there was all that polling volatility. And even on the national polling, Hillary and Trump narrowed quite a bit and were within the margin of error for each other. Even the state polling, that's different than what we've seen this time around. The state polling is much more stable. The national polling is much more stable. And the New York Times has a good poll checker where they aggregate the swing state polling daily, and then they provide breakdowns of if the polling was off as much as 2016 or even more than 2016.
It's still
and
a
so
Biden
even
win.
With both scenarios, it's still a Biden win. So that's where we are, I think, now with the polling. So, again, all the indicators are there, particularly if we're talking about a turnout election where it's highest turnout since 1908, which is, when William Howard Taft was, elected.
Everybody remembers, Willie Taft there.
Let's talk to, great-great-grandma who's alive.
Willie had a great social media campaign back in the day. It was awesome. So it feels like we're headed towards three outcomes: a narrow Biden win, a narrow Trump win, or a Biden blowout.
Yeah.
If you had to put some of your own money down and you had to bet a sum that you'd feel it if you lost it, which one of those three scenarios would you put your money on at this point?
I would probably put it somewhere between a narrow Biden win and a blowout.
You can't. You got to pick one of the three. You got to pick one. You can't. I don't know if you've ever been to Vegas, but they don't let you say, I'll take, a range of numbers between 15 or 17 or whatever when you play roulette. You probably do. I was trying to think of gambling reference, but I just don't have
roulette
one.
is the one I mostly go to. But
roulette's cool because you just bet red black.
It's easy. Yeah,
you
it's
can just
not
make
a lot
it
of thinking.
easy as you
It's
want.
not. Yeah, it's.
I love Vegas when you get down. The dude comes up and he lays out like his pattern of chips, and he's like double betting squares and stuff, and you're just betting red black.
I mean, I used to like to play blackjack, but I haven't played in so long, so I'd have to relearn it.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
But if you have to pick one outcome, which one do you think where we're headed towards? Come, I guess, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, or in the next 30 days?
I struggle because there's the outcome that's aspirational that I feel good about, but I'm still hesitant. I still have that kind of like 2016 memories at the back of my throat. So, I mean, I would want, first of all, gosh, that's tough. When you say landslide, are you saying 300 plus electoral votes? What's your definition of
that's
Biden
a good
landslide?
one. I think in a landslide, let's go. So Reagan beat Carter. I think he got 489 electoral votes to Carter's 49.
Yeah, and there's nothing
that's an ass whooping.
Right,
that's
not
going to
happen.
I would say 350.
Okay.
Above 350, you can call landslide. Is that the level that Biden wins? If you're taking that category, he's going to have to carry at least 350 electoral votes, which means he's probably going to have to win Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania to get to that high. And if he gets above that, that means he's won Texas and Ohio.
So and so with that definition, I can definitely see that. So I would take that bet. So I could see him winning Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina. I want to say he can win Texas too, but I'm still kind of like I'm hesitant to go that far.
It just doesn't feel natural.
Yeah,
to say that he can win Texas.
Yeah, I think if it does, but if that does happen, I think then that's one of those like come to Jesus moments for the Republican Party where
I think so. So are you saying that's your most probable outcome? Is a Biden plus 350 electoral college vote win? I want you to say it first so I can agree with you.
Okay, I'll say it. I'll say it now.
I feel very uncomfortable. That's what I feel.
That's what I feel
if I had
too.
To bet, that's what I would bet.
Based on the voting patterns we're seeing, based on the large turnout, because again, this, despite the claims by Trump's surrogates, turnout models, the more the turnout, the greater that favors Biden. I don't see that going any other way, and we're seeing that happen. I mean, this is going to be turnout on the level probably higher than 2008. So I think the only outcome, and 2008 was the year, that's why Obama was able to win states like North Carolina and Indiana. That didn't happen in other years because of the turnout model supported that.
And it feels like we're certainly in that wave effect election where you feel like you're participating in something historic. My wife and I felt very strongly the need to vote for Barack Obama.
Right.
I think I've said this before on the podcast. We felt like we were finishing the work that was done in the 60s. We kind of put the period at the end of the sentence by being the generation that helped elect Barack Obama. I think maybe there's some young folks in Texas and Georgia that feel
the same.
They could be part. Certainly, they don't feel a historical connection to electing Joe Biden. That's not it. They feel more of the historical connection of removing Trump from office.
And I've heard these anecdotes that give me more confidence in that predictive model that it's going to be a blowout 350 plus. When I hear these stories about college students voting, there was a college student in Pennsylvania going to school in Pennsylvania. I forget where she's from originally, but she changed her registration when she started going to school there because it's a swing state. She stood in line at the City Hall precinct in Philly for 3 hours to vote, and the line was still really long. A shuttle came by and said, hey, there's this other precinct where you can vote at. It's shorter lines. She went there. She waited another hour, cast her vote. She said this is too important. She wasn't going to get out of line. So she spent 4 hours between two different precincts waiting to cast her ballot and then not leave. So that shows a level of interest and enthusiasm.
And the NCAA
typically don't see.
Has shut down all practices and all activities on the 3rd so that all college athletes can vote.
And that's not something that's been done before.
And most teams have organized team voting outings.
I have
to register to vote. So I can see where, yes, I think the youth vote is going to maybe surpass what Obama got in 2008. It certainly feels like that could happen.
The other difference from now versus 2016 is that there isn't this big name viable third party alternative for Democrats to lose votes to. We had that in 2016 with Dr. Jill Stein on the Green Party ticket. there isn't that this time around. There is a libertarian candidate, but that's somebody who would take votes from the right, not from the left.
Did you recognize any of the third-party candidates on your presidential ballot in Kansas?
Only the Jo Jorgensen, because she's had a couple of people that have been out waving signs and really vocal.
I didn't recognize. There were like 3 of them. I didn't recognize any of them. So to your point, there was no name value this time in the third-party
And that is different than 2016, where there was, and there was this big protest vote movement. There is no movement about protest votes. You're either voting for Trump or for Biden.
Yes, I agree.
That consolidation helps immensely, because if you look at the numbers in Wisconsin and you look at the numbers in Michigan and what Hillary lost by, and you look at what the third party was able to take with the Green Party in many cases, that was the margin of victory.
Well, more evidence of that is, I believe it was Michigan, that 90,000 people just didn't vote for the president in Michigan. Yeah. They just left it blank.
That's incredible.
If Biden has anywhere, I've seen Michigan polls from 8 to 12 to 15. It just sounds like all 90,000 of those people decided, I'm going to vote for the president this time, and the vast majority of those have broken towards Biden.
Yeah.
Where at the end, what really got Hillary at the end is anybody in the final week that was making a decision seemed to all of those people seemed to break for Trump, regardless if you were independent, a Democrat who voted for Obama and just couldn't pull the lever for Hillary. It feels like that same momentum that pushed Trump through the last week is now pushing Biden in 2020.
I agree. I think we're seeing that. This is the last week before Election Day. There hasn't been any crazy shift in the polling, any crazy change in momentum. And we're now to the point where it wouldn't matter anyway. I mean, we're in that final stretch where the only focus is the candidates doing their kind of last minute blitzes through the must-win states.
So speaking of not matter anyway, have you watched any of Trump's rallies the past week where he's doing 2 and 3 at a day? And
again, I try not to watch these rallies,
any of that,
Craig, but I've seen clips of a few, but I try not to watch them. I want to keep my sanity. I
hope I'm saying this for the last time. What is the message and who is it for?
There doesn't seem to be any central message. No. And again, this is all about him. Let's talk about the Arizona rally. Martha McSally there, I think
who's in the fight for her life.
Right.
Will probably lose.
Let's just say she's likely going to lose. Yeah. I'll call it now. Martha McSally's not going to win.
She needs all the help she can get.
So she is on stage for 30 seconds, and Trump pushes her off stage so he can bring on Rand Paul and Mike Lee and I can't remember the
guys.
Others. Yeah, these other senators not from Arizona to talk him up and about how great he is. And no recognition of the fact that this is supposed to be a team effort. Like, you're supposed to help, and rally your senator who you want to win re-election. But Trump clearly doesn't care about that because, again, it's all about him. And to the Republican Party's detriment, that is going to be the catalyst for all of these seats that they're going to lose.
I go again. What was the message of that rally? I really don't care about anybody up on this stage, specifically McSally. I really don't care about her. Who was that message for? I don't know, but it wasn't for suburban women.
Yeah.
Because, again, telling a woman basically to hurry it up, be quiet, the men want to talk. Again, that's really not how you market yourself to that specific demographic.
What about the comment? I don't know if it was at that rally. It was one of the other rallies this week that he made that was also to women about, thank me for your husband's going back to work. Apparently, this is 1950s and women don't work. Their husbands go to work and the breadwinner.
I know my wife wears a string of pearls every day and a skirt, and bakes homemade bread and just waits for me to get home. And
clutching those pearls.
Oh, she's been very concerned about my work habits, I guess. It's just such. I saw a tweet that he's stuck in this 1950s mentality of America, and he just every time he tries to paint a picture of how he is impacting his electorate, it just comes out in this bizarre just mismatch of phrases and words that just don't seem to make
weird.
Any sense.
I really just don't understand it at all. It's bizarre.
And there's the mechanics of he left a bunch of old people in a field in Omaha in the freezing cold.
So
nicely done.
These were people that were left hours after the event was over, 10-degree wind chill temperature, seniors who in some cases walked 3 miles home because they were
it was like 3.5 miles to the buses.
Yeah.
So it's basically like we had a rally at the terminal here at KCI, and then we walked to extended parking because the buses weren't there to take us.
Which, I mean, I'm not even advanced in age, but like I have no tolerance or patience. First of all, I'm not going to go to a rally where I have to get there 4 or 5 hours before the president shows up.
No.
And then it's going to take me 3 hours to get out of there because they said the last buses took off at like midnight. No way.
And to hear what? Hear what message? I mean, it's the same. It's the same.
And these
rally
seniors,
on repeat.
many of these people had to be hospitalized. Some reports said 60 people, hypothermia. I mean, this is a literal and figurative example of the Trump presidency. He doesn't care for you. He doesn't care about your health, your safety, your well-being.
He doesn't know what his people need.
No.
He doesn't know that most people coming to his rallies are probably over 60.
Yeah.
Many of them have a pre-existing condition. This isn't the healthiest crowd or the youngest crowd to begin with. It's a really bad idea to make them walk 3.5 miles in the cold.
Let's go back to the fact that we probably shouldn't be holding, COVID super spreader rally events in the midst of a pandemic, let alone outside in sub-zero, wind chill. It's crazy. And think about this. The only reason he was in Omaha, because a Republican president should never be in Omaha in a traditional election, is because he is in danger and may very well likely lose Omaha's 2nd district electoral vote. Nebraska, like Maine, divides its electoral votes by congressional district. So you can pick electoral votes off. And right now, Biden is leading in the 2nd congressional district and has in all the polling, just like Obama was able to win that district in 2008. And so Trump is pursuing the strategy of trying to pick off and defend every last electoral vote he can cobble together because he hasn't been able to expand the playing field like Biden has.
And there's a couple weird scenarios where he needs those 2 electoral votes.
They could be the determinant outcome.
There's the 269 tie scenario or the 270 tie. If that happens, screw it. I don't think the American public can live through. If it's if it's a tie, then it goes to the House, and they just keep voting until they come up with a conclusion. That would be probably the most 2020 thing ever.
Confusing because each state casts one vote in the House.
Yeah,
it's
not just a straight House vote.
No, and it's based on the majority of the state, your U.S. congressional representatives. So then you start looking, okay, which party has majority in each state of their congressional representatives since they only can cast one vote. And that would be a nightmare. I remember those scenarios playing out in the year 2000. That's when I got really interested in politics. And I was reading Time magazine. They're like, this scenario, tie, and this one, all the craziness.
It just seems weird that in a year that starts with 2, you still probably couldn't go to the internet to get that.
Yeah.
That was still just the very beginning of the internet. And there was probably data, but you just didn't know how to get
there. There just wasn't as much. The internet was still in its infancy for the most part. Yeah. And I mean, they just didn't have, plus, I mean, information wasn't updated in real time online like it is now. So, I mean, if you wanted to follow the news and the nuances of the court battles in 2000, you had to read the newspaper still. Those were the days I would get the Kansas City Star and say, okay, what's happening today?
You and 3 people were the ones reading that section probably in the KC Star.
Hey,
remember when you get the Sunday paper and it was like 8 inches thick and it weighed 9 pounds and it took you all day and it was fun.
I used to read the funnies and all that.
It was so good. That's the one thing that technology has wiped out that I do miss. Magazines and newspapers, I could handle them making a little bit of a comeback.
I could too. I mean, I'm still somewhat of a magazine reader. There's a couple magazines I subscribe to just because I like my eyes glaze over eventually reading stuff online, but I have more tolerance for reading something in print, in my hands.
And I can only read bullet points online. If I'm actually going to read something, I've got to have a.
So I'm a big fan of The Atlantic, but all of their articles are a mile long.
I can't.
So I have to read the print magazine because I can't read it online. If it's an article that's 50,000 words, I'm like, no way.
So I think both of us would agree that Trump really hasn't done anything to help himself post-second debate during all of his rally tour. I haven't seen anything or any evidence that says these are directly affecting his polling numbers in these states or these are really having any type of push the race in his direction at this point.
I haven't either. And Republicans are trying to, I guess, console themselves with the fact that somehow, we should look at the rally turnouts for Trump.
Yes.
That's indicative of some kind of wave building. When we know that it's no different than the rally turnout we've seen throughout his presidency. These are the diehard people who are already in his camp. These aren't unaffiliated. Yeah. These aren't people he needs to win over. And these are the people that will turn out no matter what, that will wait 5 hours in the freezing cold. And so this is that 30% of the electorate. And so he just is able to do a better job. And the fact that Joe Biden isn't holding these types of rallies, and his voters, for the most part, wouldn't turn out for them either because, they're following the science and they're not going to risk that. And again, it's a psychological difference between Trump voters and everybody else.
There's a comic, Tim Dillon. Tim Dillon isn't for everybody. He's kind of a yeller, a screamer.
Okay. I don't think I've heard of him.
East Coast guy. People either like him or they hate him. And if you listen to Tim Dillon and say, I hate that guy, that totally makes sense because half the people hate him. He brought up a really good concept the other day on his podcast, and he framed it under the title, The Kardashians Have Finally Canceled Their TV Show. He stopped and said, I don't think we realize the importance of the Kardashians in our culture. And I'm going to link this to Trump here in a minute, but the Kardashians had no talent. They weren't selling anything. They weren't talented in any way. All they were selling was access. Access to get to view their lifestyle, access to view what they do and who they hang out with. In some ways, Trump is selling the exact same thing. He's selling enthusiasm. It doesn't matter what I'm going to do, just be enthusiastic about me doing it. It's a branding ploy. And when you see these rallies, there's nothing in them of any substance. There's no policy suggestions. It's just ranting and bitching and complaining. And I think the real legacy of Trump's of his presidency is that competency really wasn't what he was going for. It was more of building a tribe and access to him and what he was doing and kind of what culturally he was about. And if Trump leaves office now, we can probably turn that back to competency being more in line with what we expect out of a president. If he gets another 4 years, we could permanently damage that.
Oh, we could. And I think we've said all along that that's why this is a turning point election, because it comes down to whether or not 2016 was an aberration, whether it was a deviation from our norms, or whether or not we are creating new norms. And we will find out on Tuesday which of those two choices the voters make. But I completely agree that, the burn it down, go with something new mentality was strong in 2016. And also from Trump's standpoint, I think for him, his businesses were floundering. He had all these loans. The presidency was just kind of the next step in branding to do something different.
Yeah.
And I would not be shocked at all if, when he loses, he tries to start some kind of Trump TV venture or something along those lines.
I think I've got it. And I've said this to two people, and they've said I'm insane.
Okay.
He loses on the 3rd. He gets out of office January 20th or something.
Yeah.
Let's just say it's the 20th. Well, what does he do the 21st? Well, he immediately files paperwork to run for the president again. Brandon, the only avenue he has left to raise $1 billion is through running a public campaign. A bank's not going to give him any more money. No one's going to invest in him again.
True, but the problem is, though, he now has 4 years where he is a private citizen, and the law can catch up to him and come after him. So this
is an interesting question. And
downside.
I saw this posed in like the Atlantic or something on their Twitter feed. Do we really want to go after Trump? And I understand there's a whole wing of Democrats and liberals who feel the need to punish not only Trump, but punish all Republicans. And they've been mad for 4 years thinking every time Comey or Schiff or Mueller came out with something, this was the kill shot. That they not only wanted to throw Trump out of office, they wanted to punish every single Republican and every single one of his voters. If we're ever going to get past that, we can't throw him in jail after he's out. I don't care if he does shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue in New York. I think you got it. We have to let this go. If the Democrats grab the reign of power, the best thing we can just do is say, we're just ignoring everything he did. We're not going to talk about him. We're not going to mention him. We've got a new direction to go in. We're not going to waste time on that.
Well, I agree to a degree because I don't think Congress should get involved or the executive branch, in any of this. But if you're talking about like the Southern District of New York, which already has pending investigation, some of these others that are out there, I think those should be allowed to be pursued because I don't think he should be immune immune just because he's president. If there are legitimate investigations that are occurring, those shouldn't just be stopped because he's.
I agree with that.
No longer in
this
office.
Is something I think I always tell people: be very careful because it's going to be your president at some point in time.
So, gosh, if he decided to wait and run again in 4 years,
of course he's going to run again. What else can he do? I mean, he's hundreds of billions of dollars in debt. He has loans coming due in 2 years.
Do you think he becomes a Republican nominee again in 4 years?
Well, he has the most logical case, doesn't he? Everything was cool until COVID came. So if COVID wouldn't have happened, Brandon, he'd be 3 to 4 points up. He would breeze to re-election.
See, that sounds like the most awful sequel, for a B-rated movie sequel ever for him to come back.
In 2016, he has no intention of winning. It's what Trump is a giant pyramid scheme.
Now, he would be the first president if he did win, to serve 2 non-consecutive terms in office since which president? Do you know the answer to this?
No.
Grover Cleveland.
Okay.
He's the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms.
But Trump has to generate revenue. He found out
he'll be 79.
But he found out that he could. Well, Trump's ageless. He's told you that multiple times. I mean, Trump. I don't know if you know this, but Trump's a senior citizen. Remember the video
Yes.
I made you watch
Yes. Oh,
where you're like, what? Where he told the old people in Florida,
awful,
you, I'm a senior citizen. My point being is that Trump needs cash. Trump always needs cash. He's out of banks, and there's nobody going to loan or invest in him. The only way that he can go about raising high-level amounts of money is through a presidential run and a presidential campaign. And I think he'll absolutely do it again.
Well, I mean, at some point that faucet runs dry. So, I mean,
I would hope.
And, the banknotes come calling.
65 million people are going to vote for him again.
And again, under any other circumstance in any other era of American politics, the fact that he would get 45% of the vote or more is just unbelievable to me. That should not happen. But
let's talk about the most likely scenario that we think is going to happen, and that he gets wiped out to some degree. He loses and loses firmly. There's been 2 presidents in the modern era that this has happened to. Hoover in 32, Carter in 80, and then we'll throw out Bush because Bush had Perot and all of that. That leads a different.
Right.
That's a different set of circumstances. My point being, in those 2 elections, the party of the president, the party in charge, basically got completely rejected. Hoover, the Great Depression's happening. Hoover was more of a laissez-faire. This will just work itself out. It is just a market correction. It ain't no big deal. I think FDR was at least talking about people need help and we need to do something. And I want to say Hoover lost by 17 points nationally. Just got absolutely
that
drilled.
Sounds right.
And then Carter in 80, I didn't know this till I looked it up, but he only got 49 electoral votes. I think he only won a total of 6 states.
Ugh.
And Reagan, and he was an incumbent president.
Yeah.
And Reagan racked up 489
America,
electoral votes.
yeah.
I think that was a strange campaign in that there was only one debate. It happened very late in the cycle, and Reagan just destroyed Carter, and he just never recovered from that. But what's interesting about these things is each one of them in their presidency had this existential event happen. Hoover had the stock market crash, the Great Depression. He couldn't plan on that. There was no way he could know that was coming.
Right.
Carter had the Iranian
hostage crisis.
Just hung over his head that went on over a year.
Yeah, 444
just
days.
This constant pounding to the American psyche about, are we as tough as we think we are? And why is this what we considered a third-rate Middle Eastern country holding us hostage? Well, why don't we just go over there and do something
That
about
also
it?
came at the point when the American psyche was already very low because it was during the height of the Cold War.
Yeah.
You had a recession. You had sky-high inflation, high interest rates. I mean, it was a very difficult time. And then you're right. I mean, that was kind of the cataclysmic event to remind Americans that this is not who we are. Like, we're not used to just being down like this, and nothing's happening.
And each one of those elections kind of bookmark a complete philosophical change in American politics.
Yes.
FDR ushered in the age of big government.
Right.
Reagan ushered in an age of limited government. It seems like the age of limited government we're getting to the end of that. Even Republicans don't much believe anymore in small, limited government.
No, I mean, could you call what we've had over the last 4 years limited government? No. In fact, it's been, growing government.
And I think what Trump represented, too, to us was we know that small, limited government Reagan era is coming to an end. We don't know what's next. So it feels like we just put this decision off for as long as we could, and we elected a guy with no experience, no governing philosophy, no history of how to govern a nation, almost in an attempt, it feels like, to avoid some of the hard questions that are coming. And I don't know if Biden will get around to those questions, but in some ways we're all just delaying what eventually we're going to have to talk about.
The national debt, our deficit.
Which is, we're massively in debt.
Social Security solvency. I mean, all of these
We're going to run out of money.
Yeah.
The legislative process is in complete gridlock.
Right.
The president, if it keeps on the same trajectory, will just be a chancellor or a king or a monarch in the next 50 years.
Yeah, the growing executive power. Is
that what we want? The reason I'm voting for Biden is, number one, I'm a lifelong Democrat. And I'm a lifelong Democrat because I believe the federal government has a place in everybody's day-to-day life. And the reason that I'm enthusiastically voting for Biden gives us a 1% chance we could actually talk about those. Trump gives us 0.
Yeah.
Trump's just a delay to the next opportunity comes along. I don't expect Biden is going to lead some sort of historical charge to solve any of those issues, but at least we might have an opportunity.
He's not going to be a change agent, but he will be a facilitator to moving beyond where we are now. To, like you said, bringing those to the table. And for me, Trump represents a continued downslide of our norms, our values, continued corruption, continued, amassing continued executive power. And there's a whole lot to wrap your mind around, but it's the fact using the levers of government for personal gain and profit, and just the, I think, state of dysfunction and chaos. He's been a chaos president, both on when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to domestic policy, all these different areas. The death of expertise we've seen with career civil servants who have fled the government. We don't have anybody who's competent leading any of these major agencies, and they're all floundering. They can't do their jobs. So you want an America, or at least I want an America, that projects strength, confidence, competence. And we're lacking all of that right now.
My God, I just thought about, what if Biden were an actually decent candidate? And by that, I mean, he's a decent person. He's a decent candidate, but he's a universe, a galaxy away from Reagan. He's a shell of what Obama would be. If you had a Democratic version of Reagan running right now, he may run off 50 states.
It would be amazing, yeah.
Brandon just pointed out our thing popped out.
I think the Democrats are lacking that now, and so they need to really look at the post-Biden era too and start thinking about grooming a successor who is able to be that person. And I think that's been the big frustration. Biden gets you to where you need to go, but there isn't. We don't have that. That person, that. I
mean, Biden gets us Trump out of the way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really what he does.
Yeah, what he does.
What is your percentage level confidence that the Democrats take the Senate?
I am actually very confident about that now. I think they will net that. The question is how much. I'm going to go conservative on that, and unlike the Biden, win landslide, I'm going to say they get the 51 seats they need. I'm a little bit hesitant to project beyond that just because of the state-by-state nuances, but they will at least get 51 seats and get the majority they need. And it looks that way because they're going to pick up Maine, which, by the way, no matter how close Maine is, that's like a guarantee because people forget that it's a ranked choice voting state. So because of that, there are 2 independents running that are further left of the Democrats.
Yeah.
So people that are voting for those 2 independents, they can put their second choice. And so if the independent doesn't win, the independent won't win, who they would rather vote for. And you're not telling me that those far left voters are going to go for Collins. They're going to go for Gideon, who's the Democrat. Yeah. So there's no way I think that Sarah Gideon can lose that race. There is no Republican leaning or conservative independent in that race.
Gotcha.
So, and the independent's getting about 4 to 5% of the votes right now.
Well, I will stay up to watch her concession speech.
Oh, that'll be
because I want to see it. I want to see if there's a God in the universe, she comes out just knocker drunk, and for one moment in her political life actually talks honestly and openly and doesn't filter herself to her supporters as she leaves the Senate.
I hope so, because, I mean, Susan Collins has been frustrating, I think, to everybody on so many levels.
Susan Collins is one of the problems with the Senate.
She's the one who's constantly disappointed.
Yes.
Just
she's
always
very
disappointed.
She's very upset. She never does a damn thing. She's Marge Simpson.
Yeah.
That's who Susan Collins is. Let's, is there any October surprise left? Do you think the Trump campaign will try to manufacture or expose or come out with another kind of bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, 2 strikes surprise to change momentum?
Because, I mean, what do they have left? I mean, we're in the final hours. The Hunter Biden thing flopped.
Did you?
Tucker Carlson?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I mean, how convenient. It just disappeared. I had the evidence right here, and they're no longer
I'll say it again.
it.
There's times when people show you exactly who they are.
Yeah.
You just need to believe when they show you.
Right.
Tucker Carlson has shown you exactly who he is. If you choose to still believe, then that's totally on you. Well, just to tell everybody in case they missed this one, because if you're not a real Fox News crowd, you may have missed this. Give us a little bit on what old Tuck said.
So isn't this where he said he claimed he had the emails, like he had the actual
just reams of important documents?
So he
corroborated
all of the evidence, the documents, and these were supposed to be first-hand information. This wasn't, secondhand, and they're gone. They're just mysteriously missing. So, the FBI, somebody took them,
and somebody in the shipper stole them.
Yeah. Well, and the conspiracy, universe is going crazy with the FBI is in on this. It's the deep state. They apprehended them. That's what's going on here.
It's just unbelievable.
For anybody, because Tucker Carlson's program is the highest rated news program on cable news, which is crazy. He's embroiled in a lawsuit from, I forget by who's suing him for defamation.
Yeah.
His lawyers appeared in court and basically said that he should not be able to be sued because what he says is not truthful.
He's an entertainer.
Hyperbole. It's exaggeration. He's an entertainer.
And that's his Fox News lawyer.
That's his Fox News lawyer. And they're saying that Fox News viewers should know not to take anything he says as truth.
If you treat Tucker Carlson like anything other than an entertainer, that's on you.
Yeah.
I just when I was watching the clip on Twitter, because I'm like, what's this? I'm kind of watching it, and I thought it would end with, because he tells the story. We boxed them up. There was a company. We still FedExed them or UPS'd them. They called the FBI. They did a major investigation on this. And what I thought he was going to is, and thank God we digitized those or made copies because we're going to keep on this story to bring you the truth.
I mean, why would you not digitize or make copies? I mean, really? It's if you had information? Come on.
So someone gave you a copy of all these materials. You made no copy of them. You didn't scan any of them in to make electronic documents. And then you claim FedEx, UPS, whatever, magically lost them or somebody stole them out of the box. Come on.
It is so ridiculous and preposterous.
That's just... The Hunter Biden story has completely fizzled out.
It's imploded.
And the thing that I got to do some research on is Charlie Sykes the other day was talking about Steve Bannon gave an interview where he said basically our media strategy is plant left, pivot right.
Yep.
And that's where they did this to Hillary Clinton. I never understood when a lot of the
and that's why the big media outlets like the New York Times, picked up the Clinton email.
And they did this
scandal.
to Clinton.
Yeah,
and that's what the Wall Street Journal said. We're not doing this again.
Right.
And what this basically means is you take a story that is damaging to your opponent. You take some of the truth to the story. You mix in some falsities to the story that really sell it and bring your point home. And you plant that story in the mainstream media.
Right.
If they won't take the full story, you plant just the skinny part of the story, which is the facts, and that raises its profile and gives it legitimacy, and then you blow it out through the right-wing media where you add the stuff that really you want to add to the story to bring your customer down. And that's where the Wall Street Journal and mainstream media is when they saw the thing on Hunter Biden said,
they said, no,
there's just no way we're
not
doing
playing
that.
Ball.
We are not going to be manipulated.
We learned our lesson from 2016.
Did you watch any of the social media dudes on talking to the Senate yesterday?
Oh, I did see some clips of that. Yeah. I saw. What was it? I saw did you see the clip of Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee?
No.
So she asked Google CEO about some engineer who had publicly criticized her, asking if he had been fired, and he's like, I don't know if he's still here or not, or working with the company.
The CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world.
So she wants to know if a specific engineer who criticized her was fired. So much for First Amendment rights. I just thought, really, you're going to bring
criticized her?
Her, yeah.
Wow.
And she's like, he was really mean to me. He criticized me online.
She obviously doesn't know how hard it is to hire computer engineers these days.
Right.
Because the guy can code or the woman can code. We don't care who they call, anybody. We want them in.
And I was thinking, that's your question, really? So it all comes down to you being criticized by somebody, and that's what you care about? Okay. Like
the worst.
What a waste of time.
The worst hearings are always when they drag tech in front of the senators.
Oh, yeah. Because they don't know what they're talking about.
Orrin Hatch, who's was like 89, who is questioning Zuckerberg because he doesn't understand the revenue model of Facebook. And Zuckerberg just keeps saying, we sell advertisements. He's like, so when you click it, we sell ads. I mean, I didn't think we got a lot out of that by either the senators or the tech people. Again, if they hadn't blown the Biden story up, Twitter and Facebook, by banning it, I think it already would have gone by now.
Yeah.
And this is, again, who takes up this issue? Does this issue die? What issues, if Biden gets elected, just simply die with the administration change? Because there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff that's top of mind right now that as soon as Biden gets elected, you're never going to hear again.
But see, tech is one of those issues that both Republicans and Democrats have somewhat united behind for different reasons. They both see tech as kind of an existential threat, to democracy and to political speech. And you have to remember that Democrats for the longest time have been critical of Facebook, as for its past and amplifying, kind of right-wing outlets. And Republicans are critical of Google because they think, that Google is hiding information and amplifying and ranking results that are favorable to Democrats. So there's this bipartisan consensus that big tech is a threat and needs to be confronted. So I think that the approach to big tech will change, but they're still going to look at big tech as something that needs to be reined in.
Have you noticed how small your Twitter feed's gotten? My Twitter feed has shrank to almost nothing.
Oh, really? Mine's been about the same for several years.
Over the past 4 or 5 weeks, and it has to be on purpose.
Oh, okay.
I think I have noticed my Twitter feed just gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And they are definitely, I'll give you an example. I follow Ben Shapiro on
your Twitter feed, not your followers. You're talking about your feed.
Yes, my feed.
Okay, I was thinking followers.
Just gets smaller. I follow Ben Shapiro. I haven't seen a text from Ben Shapiro in probably a month. And it seems like their algorithm is really clamping down.
Well, now that you mention it, some of the people that I follow intensely and have used to show up on my feed don't now, so I have to go directly to them and find what they've tweeted out because it's not showing up in my feed.
Because it doesn't show up.
Yeah.
Let's get your final prediction. So I can't believe the next time we talk, voting will probably be over. I don't know if let me ask these as a series of questions. Do we know by midnight on the 3rd? That's right, Tuesday's the 3rd?
Yeah.
Do we know by midnight who the president of the United States is?
Ooh, that's a good question. I am going to go out on a ledge and say yes.
I want to say yes, too, because if Florida and Pennsylvania fall, it's over. There's nothing left to watch.
I really believe that Florida and North Carolina are going to fall, and so I think if both of them do for Biden, then we know.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm taking. I think that Democrats will peel off the Senate seats for Maine, Colorado, Arizona, and North Carolina.
Yeah.
So those are 4 that
Jody
they will
Ernst
have.
in Iowa loses.
And then I think, Iowa's another likely one as well that's on there. You have Montana, which is still their kind of margin of error. There's some other ones that could be easily picked off. Georgia, which is closed and a lot and is closer.
What lessons do Republicans learn after this election? Let's assume Trump is not elected and they lose the Senate, which I think we both think that's the most probable outcome.
Right.
What does the Republican psyche look like on Wednesday if that is resolved? If if we know what's the Republicans' mindset? Where do they go, or how do they start forming what their next step is? Because I don't think the Republicans know which way they're going.
They don't.
The Democrats don't really know either.
No.
But at that early infancy, what can you see happening, and who doing what in the Republican Party to start that process?
Well, there's going to be a lot of jockeying, particularly on the Senate side.
Have you noticed Christine Noem is
Yes.
traveling? Yeah. God, I hate her.
She wants to run 2024.
Yeah.
So there's already some of that going on, but there's going to be a lot of jockeying for influence to be the next leader of the party and determine the direction. So you're going to have your Tom Cottons, your Josh Hawleys who want to take up that mantle. So that is what we will see. Number one, we will see many of those same people come out with their own analysis of why they think the party lost. We weren't conservative enough. We weren't, or the other side of that, we weren't inclusive enough. We were too pro-Trump. We weren't independent enough. We need to return back to our principles. So the problem is there is no leader right now. Trump was the only thing holding it together, and it became the party of Trump. It was devoid of really any ideas or opinion leaders outside of Trump. So it's going to be chaos, I think, in the immediate days after. I don't think we ever commented on Ben Sasse, the radio interview, the town hall. Did you see
what's been done? Hey, has Big Ben balled up again? And now that he's totally safe from a primary challenger, is he popping off now?
That is true, but I think he accurately, forecast that the Republicans are going to lose the Senate. It's going to be a bloodbath, I think, were the words he said.
Again, after his primary challenge is over and he's totally wrapped up the seat, Ben decides to give you his opinion.
Right.
Outstanding, Senator Sasse.
Well, he's not winning any awards for profiles in courage. I'll say that. No bravery there.
Or another way to say it, he's a total and complete hypocrite.
But I think he will be one of the ones who will probably say, "See, I told you so," and he will be jockeying too for trying to take the reins of the party. But you have to remember they have to contend with, there are people within the party, Trump acolytes, who look to Don Jr. and to Tucker Carlson as future leaders of the party.
Ben Sasse lost any political career he had outside of Nebraska the day he said people shouldn't vote for their senators, because I'm a really moral principled man, and I'd really love to do something about the president, but I'm too chicken shit because I know I'll lose my job. So instead of confronting the president, he decided to come out and say, well, we should change the rules where I'm not accountable to the people in my state. Ben Sasse is a world-class a-hole. I don't like Ben Sasse at all. He's going to take Susan Collins' place.
See, I've always liked Ben Sasse, but at the same time, I think that he's
Ben
cowardly.
Sasse this time around showed you exactly who he is.
Yeah.
And that's the problem the Republicans have, I think, in general. Through this process with their supporting of Trump, we now know who they are.
Right.
I would say my trust of any Republican right now is at an all-time low. Are there still people in the Republican Party that you feel can be competent national leaders, people we should be looking to say, if the Republican Party has moved over to the opposition party, these are the people we need to look to lead us and to play that role?
Yes. I mean, I'm still a fan of Mitt Romney. I'm still a fan of a couple of the governors, like Charlie Baker of Massachusetts, Larry Hogan of Maryland.
Yeah.
These are never-Trump governors who have led their states very well, who have been very moderate, who are also very popular in their states, and they have shown a path forward for Republicans outside the Trump era. So there are, the governor of Vermont, Governor Douglas, who's also a Republican, same type of vein. But the problem is those are all people that have been on the outside because of their anti-Trump sentiment. So it's going to be a challenge for them to be accepted again, perhaps. And so I don't know if they have the leverage to be able to become leaders in the party.
And I would say, let's be honest, the Republicans won out of power. It's not their natural seat.
Yeah.
A president is, because I think from like 1950 to 1980, wasn't there only like two? I think there were two Democratic presidents, Kennedy and Carter.
That is correct.
That's it.
Yeah.
So up until very recent history, you wanted the Republican in the executive branch.
Right.
Republicans don't do well in the legislative areas. They usually don't have a kind of coherent governing philosophy or legislative philosophy.
Right.
They do really well in the executive branch, where we have to deal with more foreign affairs, foreign powers, more military, take more of a hands-off approach. That's been what they've
until recently.
That's been their governing policy up to recently. Who's going to form the next Republican governing philosophy?
And that's what I don't see. That's the problem, because I think if you go back, I mean, you can disagree with George W. Bush's policies, but you can't argue he wasn't competent. Like, he had a competent team. You know, there were people leading agencies. We were in this chaos and dysfunction. So we have a history of Republican presidents that have been able to lead competently and manage the executive branch. And if you look at the current crew, like, there's nobody I can point out in the Senate or House side.
I can't. You mean Tom Cotton's going to become the intellectual leader, or Ben Sass, or Josh Hawley? That doesn't.
Again, I like a few of these governors, and but that's
by the way,
it.
That's a total sausage fest too. You're not moving the Republican leadership.
Oh,
you're not moving forward without a much more diverse. Coalition.
Well, that's the other party. The coalition has shrunk. There's only I think 9 women in the Republican House conference,
and 2 senators, Loeffler, maybe just Loeffler.
Collins,
and Collins, Oh, and Murkowski.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well,
there's 3 or 4.
No, and Nebraska.
That's true.
So there's a handful. But in the House, they used to have well over 50, and they're down to 9. I mean, they've just been obliterated, and they've become wider. You know, the last black Republican in the House is no longer there, from Texas. This former CIA agent. I liked him.
Is it Green?
No. I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah.
But he was the retired CIA agent. But he's gone now, so there's no black elected Republicans.
Here's the lesson I hope Democrats take from this, running for president. Stop worrying about the Republicans. In some ways, the Republican Party is irrelevant. If we turn out, we can't be beat.
Yeah.
What the Republicans do is let them do whatever they're going to do.
Are you talking about with this election?
With any election for the president.
I do want to caveat that by saying, though, we need a healthy 2-party system. We do not have that now. I do not want us to go down the road of being like Japan, where it's basically a 1-party system and there isn't checks and balances.
But if your side can't get its shit together, that's not my problem.
But the problem is, I mean, if my side can't get its shit together, then there will be some other party that rises up. There will have to be an alternative. Something will happen. I don't see us.
Could the Republican Party get wiped out so bad on Tuesday that they leave a small crack open for a third party to emerge?
I mean, if it was ever going to happen, now's the time, right? I mean,
that would be a very nice side benefit.
And we haven't had any transformative moments with new parties, and over a generation, multiple generations.
I'm picking a big Biden win because you just said a term, transformative. I'm ready for something transformative to happen.
Yeah.
In any way, I just want some change. And heading in, for me, I feel 2021 is going to be a really rough year. I think the pandemic's got to get worse. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Well, I think 2021 is actually going to be a great year, because I think it might take a while, but we're finally going to get out of this pandemic. We are going to have a vaccine in 2021.
Yeah.
And we are going to start to return to normalcy. There's no way that's going to happen this year, and hasn't happened. And so 2020 has been a cluster, but I still see 2021 as kind of the bright spot on the horizon, because we know, we may initially get bad, and we will going into the winter, but we know we'll come back and things will get better.
Will there be any story bigger than the pandemic in 2021?
There could be. I mean, again, I think, depending on the timelines and how we come out of this, we may see some other stories. I could see that happening.
So, Brandon, my big prediction came true, but it was a total dud. Anonymous came forward, but it was that one Miles guy that's
I called it. Do you remember? I said it was Miles Taylor.
Okay.
Because I've seen him. I've been on some of the Republicans Voting Against Trump podcasts with him, and since I read the book, I'm like, that sounds like him. It's his tone. It's because you can tell a person.
Would you
like their
describe
writing
him
style
as a high-level cabinet member?
Well, no. I mean, he's deputy. Yeah, that's not high. But
he didn't have a seat at the table. He was sitting behind the person at the table, but he wasn't at the table.
Right.
Nobody said, "Hey, Miles, step up and tell me what you think." I'm assuming that all ran through was he the chief of staff for the Department of Defense?
No, Kristen Nielsen for Department of Homeland Security. He was her chief of staff.
I gotcha.
Yeah. And he's a smart guy. I mean, I think he's smart, and but I wasn't surprised it was him, because I started thinking that just based on the writing style of the book and how I saw him speak. I mean,
that was a huge disappointment, because I wanted it to be Coates or Kelly or somebody, and that just didn't materialize.
Or Mattis, somebody like that.
Something to add some interest to it. But I think it feels like the campaign is basically over. Trump's going to do some rallies. Biden will pop up from here he'll pop up somewhere. Obama's going to do a few things, but for the most part, we're just in the holding pattern until we get this out of the way.
Yeah, agreed. I did see, we saw all those national security officials that came out for Biden.
Yeah.
There's another big confluence of former DOJ officials that came out for Biden. Now, again, we've seen this over and over again, but I think what was notable about this is they said that they had served in all these administrations going back to Dwight Eisenhower, which caused me to stop and think. So if you served in the DOJ,
how old is that dude?
In Eisenhower's time, you have to be what, like 100 now? Like,
you got to be pushing it,
right? I mean,
so let's switch to our closing topics here, TVs and stuff we like. There's a movie on HBO in rotation right now, Midway. It's it's not a remake of the classic movie. It's another telling of Midway, and it's got like Woody Harrelson in it.
Oh yeah,
there's a part in the movie that is historically accurate where we bombed Japan after Pearl Harbor. We figured out a way to load up some bombers on a carrier. We got it close enough to Japan, and a squadron of bombers, actually for the first time ever, attacked and successfully bombed mainland Japan. They flew into China, where they ditched their planes, and the Chinese people actually helped them get out of China and get back up into Europe and back to the United States. What's interesting about this, I think they were called the Great 80, because there was 80 crew members who went on this mission. Of the men that survived, they held a reunion once a year, all the way up to 2019 when the last person died. Think about that. Last year,
every single year,
a dude who flew a bomber off an aircraft carrier
still alive
and bombed Japan in World War II was still alive.
Well, did you see, I think a CBS profiled this African-American woman who is 100-something.
Yeah,
but she's
like 114
she cast her
something.
First vote for FDR, and she's voting in this election.
Yes, and she survived COVID.
Yes.
And her dad died of the Spanish flu or something.
Yeah.
God, we live a long time now.
It's amazing.
That is amazing. All right, Brandon, the next time we talk, this could be over.
Yeah.
I still am having a hard time wrapping my mind around that.
Oh, it's crazy to think, but I am ready, ready for this.
So we're going to do something on election night. I'll see if I can call Mike. Mike, if you're listening, respond to my text, please, to see if he wants to jump on, and we could go from there.
Sounds good.
That's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.